Welcome to the fifth video in this video series on building an e-commerce website using React Redux, GraphQL, and Firebase. In today's video, we're going to be looking at implementing email password. Before we get started, I'm just going to demo what we'll have built by the end of this video tutorial. So of course, if we're coming from our home page, they'll be able to click on login. They'll have a link to reset their password. If they enter an invalid email, so for example, if I don't enter an email, we're using a HTML5 email field, so of course that just has HTML5 email form validation. But of course, if I enter an email that does not exist within our users collection, within our Firebase database, so for example, test@example.com, and I try and submit that, obviously I'm going to get an error. It's going to tell me that the email hasn't been found and that I should try again. If I enter, however, an email that does exist, so I'm going to go ahead and enter an email for an account that does exist within our database, click on email password. It's going to be forwarded to the login page so that I can log in. And of course, the email has now been sent. So let's come over and look at the actual email itself. And as you can see, this is the email that the user will receive. It contains a simple message to the user that just says, click this link to reset your password. And of course, I'm also going to show you how you can customize this email, or you can just modify the text. It's completely up to you. I also show you how you can customize the domain for this password reset link. But again, these are all things that we'll cover later on in this tutorial. For now, let's just click this link to reset the password. The user will be taken to a new page where they can actually enter in their new password. So let's go ahead and do that. Once they click on save, it will update the user's password and they'll be able to click on continue, and at which point they'll be sent back to your website where they can log in with their new password. And as usual, before we begin this video tutorial, just want to encourage you guys to subscribe to my channel, which is youtube.com/simpletut. On here, you can find all of our content. But what I really want to encourage you guys to do is check out the official playlist for this series. As I've already mentioned, this is the fifth video of this series on building an entire e-commerce website. And of course, after I upload each one of these videos, I will be adding them to this playlist. Again, so far this is the fifth video, but of course as I create more videos for this series, they will all be posted here, and the link to this playlist will be posted directly in the description of this video. So you can either click that or you can visit our channel and search for the playlist directly. I also want to encourage you guys to check out the official Github repository for this project. So at the end of each one of these videos, I'm pushing the code I write to this repository so that if at any point you want to come over, you want to compare your code with mine, or you want to look at the files in the browser, or you just want to clone the entire project, run it on your machine and check it out for yourself, feel free to do that. Again, there'll be a direct link in the description of this video, or you can find it by visiting our GitHub page, which is github.com/simpletut. You can also check out some of our other cool projects too. Overall, I just want to encourage you guys to like, comment, and subscribe, and of course, star our project on GitHub. But also, please do visit our official website, which is simpletut.com, where you can find links to all of our tutorials and cool open source projects that you guys can check out. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create a new page that we can actually use to insert our email password form. So what I'm going to do, come back over to my text editor. I'm going to go into the source folder and my pages directory. I'm going to create a new folder called recovery. And inside of this, I'm going to have my index.js file. And I'm just going to import React from React. And then I'm going to have a functional component. So I'm going to say const recovery equals props. And we're just going to have a return statement. And for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a div tag with a h1 because I want to just see it rendered out on the page in the browser. and I'm just going to say email password. And we're going to come back to this, but what we're going to do for now is just export default recovery, and we can save that. Now that we have our pages component, we can go back to app.js and we can create our new route. So where we import our pages components, we're going to import a new one, which is our recovery component. So that's in our pages directory and recovery. And what we can do is come down, create our new route. So right here, we're going to have route. We need to set the path, and the path is going to be /recovery. But we want to have, we want to tell this route what it needs to render. So what we want it to render is we want to render our, of course, our recovery pages component, but we want to obviously specify the layout. So we're going to use our main layout, and the child we're going to pass is, of course, going to be recovery, our recovery component. Okay, and once we've done that, we're good to go. I'm just going to indent this, and let's save that. Now let's come back over to our web browser, and let's actually visit this new route. So we want to visit recovery, and as you can see, that's our new page setup. So at this point, we're ready to actually build our email password form, and this is going to be a fairly simple form. All it's going to actually contain is an email field and a submit button, but I want to pause, right, because what I've noticed is that what I'm going to show you. So if I actually come over to either the registration page or the login page, we have some repetitive code that I've noticed, right? So we have this auth wrapper, right, which basically wraps our forms. It basically has this box and basically a H2, and then we have our form, which is different. But if we look at the registration page, it's also the same, right? We have a basic box that wraps our forms, and the styling is exactly the same. So this is a bit repetitive, and especially now that we want to create our recovery, our email password form, I certainly don't want to have to keep writing this out. And then, going forward, if I want to make a change, I'm going to have to update every single one of these components individually, which isn't great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refactor this a little bit, and we're going to create a component that can actually do this for us, and all of the CSS and styling will just be in one place, and we're just going to update our other forms. So let's go ahead and tackle that. So what I want to do is come back over to my components directory, and we're going to create a new folder inside of my components directory. We're going to call this our auth wrapper. And we're going to create a new file. It's going to be index.js. We are going to need a style sheet. So I'm going to say styles.scss. And on our index file, it is going to be a functional component. So we just need to import React from React. And we just need to create our functional component. Of course, I also need to import my style sheet. So I'm going to import that too. So styles.scss. And then, of course, we can just create our functional component. So it's going to be auth wrapper. And it's just going to equal, so props function. And we're going to have our return statement. And again, for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have like a div. And it's going to have a, we're going to give this a class, right, of like, well, auth wrapper. And we'll have another div inside of that where we're just going to call this like wrap. And what I want to do is, instead of it just importing props here, right, I want to destructure from props a couple of things. So the first thing I'm going to import is my headline. This is going to basically be our H2. And then I'm also going to import well, I'm going to say children. And what I want to do is I want to take children and I want to render children within the component here. And I think also we're going to have a H2. So I'm actually going to have a H2 here. So we'll say H2 and we'll insert our headline. But I only want to render the headline, in fact, if it's passed in the props. So I'm going to wrap that in a conditional, something like that. And yeah, so that looks good. And we'll say children, we'll wrap that in like a conditional too. So that looks good. And for now, that's okay. But I think also I'm going to wrap the children in a div tag. We'll say this class name, we'll just say children. Cool. That looks good. Add a semicolon, export default auth wrapper. Okay, and now what I want to do here is I want to come over to, let's say, our sign-in component. Let's start with that. And let's look at the structure of our HTML in this file. So similarly, we have one wrapping div with a wrapper. Then we have our H2, and then we have our form, basically. So what I want to do is I want to come over and grab this CSS. And I'm just going to copy this, right? Just going to copy it for now. And what I want to do is come back over to auth wrapper and the style sheet I have for my auth wrapper, and I'm just going to paste it. And I kept the structure pretty similar. So I created my class, which is auth wrapper. So in my auth wrapper style sheet, I'm going to replace the sign-in class with auth wrapper. We're going to leave the styles unchanged. We then have wrap, and in our auth wrapper, we have wrap as well. Then we have our H2, and of course the H2 is here. We don't need this styling, but we can save that now. And yeah, this looks good. So let's come back over now to our sign-in component. And what I want to do is just show you this in the browser. So let's come to sign in. So this is our login page. So in theory, it shouldn't look any different, right? When I'm finished. So remember how this looks. Let's come back over to the text editor like this, and let's import our auth wrapper. So I'm going to import my auth wrapper from the auth wrapper component. So it's, yeah, auth wrapper. And I want to use this component. So I'm going to do a little bit of tweaks here. So basically I'm going to delete everything up to the H2. And I'm going to have my auth wrapper. And then we just need to clean this up. So we want to basically up to here. We'll close this off. So it should look like this. So we have our auth wrapper, which is a parent component, and then we have our form wrap and our form. Cool. We can also come to the sign-in style sheet, and we can just delete everything but our social sign-in style here, because this social sign-in class is for div here that's inside of our form. So let's come back to our web browser. Cool. So this actually looks exactly the same. Nothing's changed, which is awesome. The only thing that has changed is the H2, but that's because we haven't passed it to the auth wrapper component, because remember, we need to pass that as a prop. So let's come back over to our text editor, and just within my render method, but before the return statement, I'm going to say const config auth wrapper. And we're going to just specify that headline. We're just going to say that this is login. So this is basically our H2. And we just need to pass that configuration object as basically pass those props to our auth wrapper component. And again, if I come back now to the browser, as you can see, everything looks the same. And that's, that's really nice. So let's utilize this same component now on our registration form as well. So let's come back over to our text editor and do the same thing. So for our sign up component. So we have our sign up component. Again, I'm just going to close all of these files to make it a little bit easier for you to follow. Let's come over to our sign up component, go into the index file. And the first thing, again, we need to do is import our auth wrapper component. We want to import that from auth wrapper. And we're just going to wrap our form with this component. So here we are. So we're going to up again to the H2. We have our auth wrapper. And all we need to do up until this point, we just need to close it off. So we have our form, and in this case we also have our errors here. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to move our errors inside of our form wrap, but just above our form, because this needs to simply return a single wrapper. So we can't put our errors unordered list outside of the form wrap. It needs to be inside. But again, we need to specify our H2. So again, const config auth wrapper, and just build the props. So again, we just want to pass headline, which is our H2, and we're just going to say registration. So let's pass that to our auth wrapper component, save that. Let's come back to the browser. And again, let's refresh this. As you can see, so nothing visually has changed on either one of these pages or the login or the registration forms, but we've made a refactor that's really going to improve our code. And actually, let's come back over, because I also want to clean up the style sheet for my sign up component. So let's come in here, and actually all we have here is this form wrap. We added a margin to it. Everything else is actually we've basically refactored away. So we can the only thing we need to have is our form wrap, which we have here, which is it's specific to this particular page. So let's again come to the browser, and again, as you can see, nothing has changed. The styling is exactly the same. And again, we have those errors. Let's test those. So that was for the password and confirm password validation. So if password is 1, confirm password is 2, obviously they don't match. So if you click on register, you see the errors rendered. So that's fine. And what we want to do now is utilize the auth wrapper to just basically help us build the form on our email password page. So for our email password component. So what we need to do is now come back over to VS Code and create our email password component. And the first thing that we need to do is inside of our components folder, we need to create our email password form component. So let's create a new folder. We're going to call it email password. And inside of this, we need to create our index.js file and a style sheet, so styles.scss. And again, and this is going to be a class. So we're going to import React from React, but we're also, this time, we're going to destructure from React component, and we're going to import that style sheet. So we're just going to import styles.scss, and then we can create our class. So this is going to be email password, and it's going to extend component. We need to have our render method and our return statement. And again, for now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to import my form components. So I'm going to import my auth wrapper. So this is, again, it's going to be very useful throughout this application. And we're just going to import that, of course, from auth wrapper. We want to import our form components. So again, we're going to have our form input from It's in our forms directory and our form input. And then of course we want to import our button. We'll import that from, again, our forms directory and button. Now that we've got that, in our return statement, all we'll do is we'll return our auth wrapper. And for now, I'm going to just create my config. So const config auth wrapper, and that's going to contain our headline. This is going to be, again, used for our H2, and we're going to call this email password. We're going to pass that to our auth wrapper. And for now, I'm going to leave it there, but what we'll do, we'll come back to this and finish off our form. But we want to export default email password. And then what we can do is we can come back to our pages component. So we have our pages folder, and we created our recovery page component. And inside of this, I need to import that new component for email password. So we have email password from components and email password. And rather than return this div tag with the H1, we're just going to return the email password. So if I now come back over to the web browser and we go directly to recovery, you're going to see that we have our wrapper and our H2, but we don't have our form yet. So let's actually go ahead and build our email password form. That's going to be pretty easy to do. All we need to do is come back over to our text editor, and let's head back over to our email password component. And all we're going to do is create another div. This is going to have a class of form wrap. And inside here, we're going to have our form. And we need to obviously just build our initial state. So our initial state is just going to be const initial state equals. And all it's going to actually contain is email. And that means we need to have our constructor. So we're going to create our constructor. And then we just need to initialize our initial state. So we'll say this.state and pass our initial state. And once we have that, we're free to actually destructure from state within our render method. Email. And we can use that in our form. So again, we have our form input component. And what I'm going to do is just going to build that. So we need to pass a few props. So, we need to pass a few properties here. So the first one is going to be type, which is going to be email, because this is going to basically be an email field. We need name. Again, this is just going to be email. We need value. And this is going to be, again, email. We need placeholder. And this is just going to be email as well. Now, again, if I come back to the web browser, I have my email field. But if I type, obviously this doesn't update. And the reason is we have binded this to the value for email from our state. And there's no way of us actually updating the state. So we need to have we need to use the onChange event, and that's going to call this .handle change. We need to bind that. So we'll say this.handle change equals this.handle change .bind to this. And then we need to create that method on our class. So that will be handle change, which will take an event, and then we'll destructure from the event.target, and we want to destructure the name and value, and then we can use that to update the state. Sorry, so it's this.set state, and we can update the name and value, and of course the name in this instance is going to be email, which obviously matches the key in state for this email, for this form field, and the value of course is the value again of the change. So let's come back to the browser, and we have an error. So okay, so I missed something, so let's come back to the text editor, and in our handle change method this should equal. Let's come back to the browser. This works. Let's try and enter an email. So test@email.com. Great. So it obviously works. The problem is that we don't have a form button, so we need to add that. Let's come back to the text editor, and luckily we have our form button component. We're going to use it. So we need to come back to our form and just insert our button. And the text we want to pass to the button is just going to be email password. And of course this needs to be type submit. But we don't have, we need to actually create our handle submit method for our class. So we're going to say on submit. And we haven't created this method yet, but what I'm going to call it is handle submit. And we need to create that. So again, up here, let's say handle submit, and this is going to equal a function, takes an event, something like this. We can also call, this also needs to be async. And first of all, we want to say, we want to prevent default, right? So we'll say prevent so it will be the event.prevent default. And this will just prevent, because this button is submit, type submit, this will prevent the page from posting to itself and basically causing a page refresh. So let's save this. Let's come back to the browser and have a look at what we've done. So this looks pretty good now. We have our email password form, you know, and if I just enter an email, let's say this is a test@email.com, and click this, of course nothing happens, right? But also, if it wasn't a valid email, I'll get the normal standard HTML5 email validation, because this is a type email field. So this is great, right? So what this actually does is it allows us to basically submit the form, capture the user's email, and that's pretty much all we need to do. Okay, so we've built our email password form, but at the moment it's not doing anything. So we need to integrate this with Firebase so that users can actually enter an email, and then we can actually basically tell Firebase to send a reset email to that user so that they can reset their password and log into their account. So to do that, I'm going to head back over to my text editor, and on my email password form component, we have this handle submit method, which is called on the form's submit. So what we want to do is we want to have a try catch, and we're going to catch any errors. If there are any, we'll console log them out. So we'll console log the error. For now, I'm going to comment that out. And inside of my try, I'm going to destructure from state. So this.state, the user's email that they've entered into the form. And then before I write any more code here, I need to import the auth library from Firebase. Now, in an earlier video of this tutorial, we created this Firebase utility file where we exported the auth library. So just to show you that, this is our Firebase utility file that we created in an earlier tutorial in the series. And as you can see here, we're exporting auth, the Firebase auth library. So we can use this, we can import this into our email password form component. And what that will allow me to do is within my try, I'm going to use this, so it's async await. We're going to use the await keyword here. And we're going to use the auth library. We're going to say send password reset email. We're going to call this function, but we need to pass it two things. The first is going to be the user's email. And the second thing is going to be a configuration object. So we're going to say const config, it's going to equal an object. And we want to pass it the URL. This is the return URL. This is the URL of the page we want to send the user once they've reset their password. So in this case, just to give you guys an example, I want to send them back to the login page. So when they've actually reset their email, they can come back here and log in. So I'm just going to grab this URL, and of course you can actually enter, you can pass the actual URL that you're going to have on your live site. So you'd enter your domain here. If it was HTTPS, it'd be HTTPS. But in this case, we're in a development environment. I'm just giving you guys a demo, showing you how to code it. So I'm just going to use the localhost URL here. But feel free to make this whatever you want. And I'm just going to pass this with my email. And then what we want to do is we want to use this then callback here. And we want to specify what should happen when it's successful. And we want to also if it fails, we want to do something else. So if it passes, for now, we're just going to say that password reset. And if it fails, we'll just console log something went wrong. Now, of course, this isn't what I'm actually going to do in these events. But of course, I want to just demo this to you in the browser. So let's come over to the browser and let's head back over to our email password form. Let's open up our console. And the first thing I'm going to do is I want this to fail. So I'm just going to enter something that is invalid. So for example, test, this is not an email. Let's enter that. And you're going to see that we get the normal email validation, this HTML5 email validation. So it doesn't allow the form to submit because it wasn't a valid email. Let's enter a valid email. So test@email.com. But of course, this email does not exist within my my Firebase users collection. So this would still be invalid. Let's click on email password. And as you can see here, it does post, but we get a 400 error. And as you can see here, we log out, something went wrong. So we've captured this event where the email password fails. But what about if it is valid, if it passes and that email password is sent? So let's enter a valid email of an account that is in our database. And let's click on email password. And as you can see here, we're now getting that password reset confirmation. So we are catering for both events. We know when the email password form has succeeded and that email has been sent, and we know when it failed because they either entered an invalid email or maybe it just doesn't exist. So let's handle both of these events. So the first thing that I want to do, if this succeeds, is I want to redirect the user away from this page and to the login route, right? So to do that, we're going to import something from React Router DOM, right? So we're going to import from React Router DOM, and we want to import, with router. And we're going to use this. So we're going to come down, and where we export default, we're going to wrap this around with router. And what this will do is it will give us access to the history stored in React Router. So what I can then do is say this.props.history.push, and I can push the user to my login route. Okay, so let's test this out. Let's come back over to the browser and let's enter a valid email, and that will actually submit a password reset email. So I'm going to enter that, and I'm going to send this. And as you can see, I'm then redirected to the login route. Okay, cool. Let's come back over to my text editor. And what I want to do is I want to render an error if this fails. So I need to do a little bit of work here on the component because we don't yet have a way of handling errors. So similar to how we handled it in our registration form component, I'm going to have an errors array, which will be empty by default. And we're going to store that in our state. And in the event that there was an error, I'm going to create a new errors array. So I'm just going to say error equals an array with a string, and I'm just going to say email not found. Please try again. And I want to say this.setState, and it will be errors, and it will equal our new error array. But we're not rendering them out at the moment. So again, we're going to destructure within our render method our errors array. And if there are any, we're going to wrap this in a conditional. But if there are any, so we're going to say if errors.length is greater than 0, we want to do something. And in this case, we're going to have a unordered list, and we're going to map through. So we'll say errors.map. We'll grab the current error and the position, which is going to be the index. We want to return, in this case, a list item. And we want to render out, first of all, the error itself, but we're going to have to set the key, which is going to be the position, which is the index. Cool. Let's add a semicolon here. Let's save that, and let's come back over to the browser. And this time, let's come back over to email password. Let's enter an invalid, well, an email that is valid. It is an email, but it does not exist within our database, email password. And as you can see, we're rendering out our error. At this point, we have built our email password form, and we've also integrated it with Firebase so that if you actually submit your email in this form, it will actually send you a password reset email, and you'll actually be able to reset your password. And of course, in a few moments, I'm going to show you what that looks like and also how you can actually customize that email template that gets sent from Firebase. There is one thing that we haven't looked at yet, and that's the fact that we're not linking to email password currently from anywhere within this application, which is a bit of a problem. So what we need to do is actually link to email password from our login page and our login component. So let's go ahead and address that issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to our text editor, and specifically to our sign-in form component. And what we want to do is import at the top. We just want to import from React Router DOM the link component. We'll just scroll down, and below our social sign-in div, we'll have a new div. We'll give it a class of links, and we want to just add our link component. We'll specify the to prop that we need to pass, which is just going to be /recovery. That's the route that we created for our email password page. It's /recovery, and we just want to say reset password. Now, if we come to the browser, that is going to work, but obviously it doesn't look that good right now. So we want to add a little bit of CSS. Let's come back over to our component. Let's go into the style sheet for our sign-in component. And we're just going to target links. We want this to be, let's say, display block. We'll say width 100%. Let's add a margin. So we'll say about 15 pixels, 1.5 rem from the top, nothing from the bottom. And we'll just reset that color. So we'll say that any link within that should be black. Let's come back over to our browser, and yeah, that looks a lot nicer. So now you can obviously register. Once you've registered, you can come and log in. If you need to reset your password, you can click through and reset your password, or you can come back up here and just log into your account. Now let's send a password reset email, and let's have a look at what this actually looks like when it comes through. So I'm just going to insert an email from a user's account that's within my collection. It's cool. So let's email that password. And now let's head over to our email. So as you can see, this is the email I have received. It's a fairly straightforward template. The things I want to point out here is two things. The first thing is you can notice the email, the name that it is referring to in terms of your website. So as you can see here, it says eCommerce website password. So what is this? Now this is the project name that you created when you created your Firebase project. That was at the very start of this tutorial series. Now I'm going to show you how you can customize and modify this template as you wish. I'm also going to show you how to customize the link, because as you can see, the link here that you get, that Firebase sends, is also referencing the eCommerce website, which is the project name of our Firebase project. When you created your Firebase account at the start of this series, I named it for this tutorial eCommerce website. So if you named your Firebase project something different, then that's what you're going to see here. But again, I'm going to show you how to customize the email template and also show you how you can customize the domain. And it's actually really, really simple. You just do it from your Firebase control panel. But before we get there, I just want to come back and I want to show you how to reset your password. So I'm just going to click on this link. That's going to launch a new window in the browser. And as you can see, I have an option now to reset my password. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and click on save. When I do, it's just going to pop up saying that the password's been changed. You can now sign in with your new password. And I have this button to click on continue. And if I click on that, you're going to see I'm taken back to my login page. And what's really important to note here is that if I come back over to my text editor and I go to my email password component, when we actually send this request, I mentioned before this configuration object and the return URL. So you notice that when I reset my password and click continue, I was sent back to this login page, and that's why. It's because when we actually sent the request, we passed the config object with this return URL. So remember, it's really important that you pass this in your configuration object so that you always send the user back to the correct location and return URL. Okay, so now as I previously mentioned, I was going to show you how you can customize that password reset email, and I'm just about to do that. So I've come over to my Firebase control panel, but again, I just want to show you guys exactly what I meant. So as you can see here, my Firebase project is called eCommerce website. And that is what you are seeing inside of the password reset email. So whatever your actual Firebase project is called is by default what you'll see when you are sending that password reset email. So most of the time, the title of this project is going to be for your own personal reference, but there are some circumstances where a front-end a user of your application may see the project title. So it's really important that you consider these things as you're building and creating your project. Okay, so let's look at how we can customize that password reset email, because it's really easy to do and definitely worth it. So all you have to do is, again, from your Firebase control panel, go into the Develop tab, click on Authentication, and come across to the Templates tab. And this is a tab that we haven't looked at yet in this tutorial. And just on this left-hand column here, you'll see the option for password reset. So again, these are all the different emails that may get sent out from your application to users, depending on what you build into your application. And as you can see over on the right, this is your email template. This is what we got sent when we requested that password reset email. And you can customize this really easily. All you have to do is click on this pencil icon, and as you can see, you're suddenly able to edit this text, these fields. There are some dynamic placeholders. So for example, the app name, again, for me that was eCommerce website. This is your project, your Firebase project name. So these are some dynamic placeholders that will insert these values. So for example, here this is going to be the user's email. This is the link for the password reset. So again, I wouldn't advise you guys to modify this too much if you're unfamiliar with some of this code. But if it's simple text changes, then feel free to go ahead and edit this as you want. Now, other than the actual contents of the password reset email, you will notice that the URL that the user clicks on to actually reset their password from within the email is not your domain name. So Firebase actually takes the user to a custom page within Firebase that they can reset their password, and then they click on continue, and as you saw, they send the user back to your website. That's how it works. Now, what you may want to do is customize and personalize that workflow a little bit more. And one way you can do that is actually by enforcing the URL that the user will see when they click on that link in the email or in the browser when they actually go through and click it. You can set that to be your domain name. And to actually do that is pretty straightforward. Within this same window, all you have to do is click on Customize Domain. This pop-up will open, and of course all you're asked to do is enter your domain name, and if you click continue, obviously here you can see they will want you to verify that you actually own the domain name, and that just means editing your DNS settings for your domain. Again, this is not something that I'm going to cover in this tutorial because it's a little bit off topic because it's a little bit outside the scope of this tutorial, but it's something that I want to make you guys aware of because it is pretty easy to do. And of course, if this is going to be your company website, your business platform, then it's definitely worth the effort. And again, it's really easy to do. It's not going to cost you any money. And it is just personalizing that user experience a little bit more. And why not? So this is how you do it. That's how you edit the reset password email, and that's how you customize the domain name that the user will be clicking on when they want to reset their password. And these are all the little things that just improve the user experience that little bit more. And that brings us to the end of this video tutorial. But before we sign off, I'm going to head over to my terminal window and I'm going to check in my code. So I'm going to commit. My message is just going to be email password, and we're going to check that in. And I'm going to push origin, the name of the branch, and after I sign off this tutorial, I'm going to merge this in with master. Now in the next video tutorial, we're going to be looking at setting up user roles within our application. What that means is basically setting up an admin area and allowing an admin to log in and access pages that normal users cannot. We'll also refactor the way that we handle restricting access to pages. Currently, we're doing that within our routes themselves, but we're actually going to start doing it with a higher order component. But of course, for now, thank you for following this video tutorial. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more content. Have a great day.